Good evening. Today, in Satoshi's Corner, we're looking at proof of work. Energy consumption by the Bitcoin network is a big issue, and we spent the best part of episode 8 to debunk the myth that the Bitcoin global network was not energy efficient, and actually will double down on that argument later in this podcast. So, please stay tuned. Satoshi's Corner, Season 1, Episode 9.
My name is Hermann Djoumessi, social media, blockchain, and big data consultant. This podcast is a bite-sized summary of a potential conversation with Satoshi Nakamoto's seminal white paper, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The goal of this podcast is to establish the many sources and resources necessary to create, deploy, and optimize blockchain technology ecosystem in order to establish a Bitcoin or blockchain standard for businesses and organizations in the 21st century.
Proof of work is an interesting one. First, as a social media manager, when studying crypto assets communities' behavior, we'd focus first on proof of community. The Bitcoin digital inception, as started in 2009, has shown key differences between the different crypto communities, from hodlers who simply want to hodl onto their stash of cryptocurrencies or crypto assets, as we said last time, to digital whales who are basically a huge hodler of significant amounts of cryptocurrencies, up to hundreds of millions and billions even, okay, who sometimes may dabble into pump and dump as well. We have to say that, let's face it. To the anarchap, who are simply looking for a way to get away from the orthodox and current fiat-based money system based on paper and coins, to the African diaspora or Asian diaspora, who sometimes would use crypto assets and cryptocurrencies for remittance back home, right? Or to their families sometimes that have been living on the continent. To the cyber hornets, of course, who will provide, if you want, the echo chambers for the crypto movement, or not only provide the echo chambers, but also will be the media arm of the crypto movement. So as a reminder, the social media digital inception is a set of digital process enabling the fast spread of a message or a concept in order to impact reality and measure it via analytics. At the beginning was the blog, of course. Then came social media, and later on will come crypto social media. Then, as a crypto specialist, our focus went towards proof of work, energy consumption, and cybersecurity, as the Bitcoin global network, in its unique design as per the Satoshi protocols, offers at least 4 layers of security, all right, in which both, right, proof of work and proof of community play a huge and significant role. So let's have a look at what the protocol has to offer on the subject. We are now in front of the Satoshi white paper, a purely P2P version of electronic cash would allow online payment to be sent directly from one party to another. So that's what we read last week. That's, of course, the abstract. Then we saw introduction, and introduction concludes with those very important words: the system is secure as long as honest nodes collectively control more CPU power than any cooperating group of attacker nodes. All right, that's a key notion: the nodes and the security of the system being underpinned by whoever controls the largest amount of CPU power, because that's going to be called at a later stage consensus. But you need to understand that this is a very important notion that is already explained straight from the introduction of the Satoshi white white paper. Then you go into number 2, which is of course transaction, and breaks down exactly the complexity of the transaction system with the public keys and the signature, of course, the SIG. Sometimes you're going to hear about when you see different crypto items or different crypto discussions. People will talk about SIG, they mean signature, of course, and that's during the transaction. Okay, the notion of the public key, the hash, and the signature that are all going into the actual hash of transaction. Okay, then of course timestamp server, okay, which in itself is very important because, as we explained, it enables us to have a chronological order of transaction. And the fact that we have a chronological order of transaction that is decided by a system means we don't have to rely on a third party to tell us who was the first PE and who was the second one, right? If ever let's say 2 transactions of the same amount of money, or the same amount if you want, or the same amount of value if you want, would happen at the same time, or let's say with 1 or 2 second difference, which one should have to be paid first, all right? To avoid, for example, the double spending problem, meaning you will be spending the same amount of money in 2 different operations, for example. So people could do that. But if the system tells you, well, no, one transaction happened before the other, so therefore the person will not be able to do a double spending, which is, as I've explained, spending twice the same amount of money. So the timestamp server, if you want, provide a huge amount of security on that ground. So that was point number 3. Then of course this is point number 4, which is proof of work. Now let's read the white paper. It says, to implement a distributed timestamp server on a peer-to-peer basis, we will need to use a proof of work system similar to Adam Back's Hashcash rather than newspaper or Usenet post. The proof of works involve scanning for a value that when hashed, such as with SHA-256, the hash begins with a number of 0 bits. We're going to go back and explain what is exactly SHA-256. Alright, it's a hash function. We'll get back to it. The average work required is exponential in the number of 0 bits required and can be verified by executing a single hash. For our timestamp network, we implement the proof of work by incrementing a nonce in the block until a value is found, okay, that gives the block hash the required 0 bits. Once the CPU effort has been expended to make it satisfy the proof of work, the block cannot be changed without redoing the work, as later blocks are chained after it. All right, the work to change the block would include redoing all the block after it. Now we understand that the Bitcoin Global Network, to some extent, capture energy because you will need, okay, if we read the white paper properly, okay, as later blocks are chained after it, the work to change the block would include redoing all the blocks after it. So what do we have? If we look, we have a graphic now, and we look at the graphic. The graphic says this: we have 2 big squares, and that's exactly 2 blocks of data, in which we have obviously written down the transactions in each blocks, right? Each block is a block of data, block of transactions. But in the same block, what you have also, you have the previous hash, and you have also what is known as a nonce. We will go back to what is a nonce. And then you would have a second block, which will also have obviously the previous hash coming from the previous block. Then you'll have a nonce, and underneath it you will have the new transaction that have been, if you want, recorded with the second block, right? So you have block number 1 and block number 2. Block number 1 has the previous hash, a nonce, and a whole raft of transaction. Okay, that's block number 1. Then block number 1 goes into block number 2, right? And block number 1 is being recorded inside that old hash, goes into the new block. right? And then you have announce and you have transaction underneath, right? You always take the previous hash. That's how you create the chain. It's because you have the data from the previous block in the new block. That's why it's a chain, all right? That's the whole idea. It's a chain of digital signature, and which means that you have the information from the previous that goes into the new, all right? That's the whole idea of a chain, a digital chain, of course. Let us go back to the white paper. The proof of work also solves the problem of determining representation in majority decision making. If the majority were based on one IP address, one vote, it could be subverted by anyone able to allocate many IPs. Proof of work is essentially one CPU, one vote, which is very difficult to achieve computationally. The majority decision is represented by the longest chain, which has the greatest proof of work effort invested in it. If a majority of CPU power is controlled by honest nodes, an attacker would have to redo the proof of work of the block and all blocks after it, and then catch up with and surpass the work of the honest nodes, which basically gives the rogue attacker 8 to 10 minutes to attack the network, right? It really lowers the size of the window of opportunity an attacker could have to attack the network. You can only do it every 8 minutes if you want. We will show later that the probability of a slower attacker catching up diminishes exponentially as subsequent blocks are, of course, added of course to the longest and original chain. Now let's go back to the paper. To compensate for increasing hardware speed and varying interest in running nodes over time, the proof of work difficulty is determined by a moving average targeting an average number of blocks per hour. If they are generated too fast, the difficulty will actually increase. And that's it for our reading today. And next week we'll delve deeper into point number 5, which is of course network. Point number 5 on the white paper, of course. And we open up the Satoshi Chronicle jingle. The Satoshi Chronicle, where we really try to find out how the different elements of the white paper and Bitcoin technology are impacting the internet consciousness and the real physical world. Of course, in our observation today, we'll have to be the peer-to-peer network. So what is a peer-to-peer network or peer-to-peer computing? It is a distributed application architecture that partition tasks or workloads between peers. Alright, we partition tasks and workloads between peers. Alright, it's a distributed application. Peers are equally privileged, equipotent participants in the application. They are said to form a peer-to-peer network of nodes. Peers make a portion of their resources, such as processing power, disk storage, or network bandwidth. That's very important. Processing power, disk storage, or network bandwidth directly available to other network participants without the need for central coordination by servers or stable hosts. Peers are both supplier and consumer of resources, in contrast to the traditional client-server model in which the consumption and supply of resources is actually divided. Now, a peer-to-peer network in which interconnected nodes share resources amongst each other without the use of a centralized administrative system. That's the basis of the peer-to-peer network. If you want the more kind of a regular notion that most of you have, let's say in your office space or at your job or school, whatever, right? It's rather a network based on the client-server model, where individual clients request services and resources from centralized server. All right, that's a key difference. Different architecture that we could actually name as peer-to-peer, right? Peer-to-peer system had previously been used in many application domains. It's not domain, it's nothing new, right? The architecture was popularized by the file sharing system Napster, released in 1999 at the end of the 20th century. The concept has inspired new structure and philosophies in many areas of human interaction. In such social context, peer-to-peer as a meme refers to the egalitarian social networking that has emerged for our society, enabled by internet technologies in general. Those are, of course, extremely resilient system and scalable computer network too. Other peer-to-peer application, or peer-to-peer, or P2P, right? Application P2P, P, the letter P, 2, number 2, and then P again, will be the Bitcoin network, of course, Ethereum, of course, no problem, and a lot of peer-to-peer based digital cryptocurrencies, or assets, as we should call them nowadays, crypto assets. Please use that name if you don't want to get in trouble. You have I2P, which is an overlay network used to browse the internet totally anonymously. You have the US Department of Defense, which is conducting research on peer-to-peer network as part of its modern network warfare strategy. You have WebTorrent, of course, Tor, which is the famous browser that we can, the famous network that we can use in the deep web, for example. So there are a lot of technology that we use nowadays, peer-to-peer technology, including Microsoft in Windows 10. Let's look now at Adam Back Hashcash. He wrote a white paper on the 1st of August 2002, Hashcash, a denial of service counter measure. Email adam@cypherspace.org. That's interesting, cypherspace.org. It has some eerily reminder of the Satoshi'S white paper, actually. The structure, the intellectual construction of the white paper is kind of similar to the Satoshi'S white paper. So if this could be an indication of anything, for those of you listening, I would say get digging. This is data mining 101. Alright, so let me read it. Hashcash was originally proposed as a mechanism to throttle systematic views of unmethods internet resources, such as email and anonymous remailer in May 1997, at the end of the 20th century. 5 years on, this paper captured in one place the various application improvements suggested and related subsequent publication, and describes initial experience from experiment using Hashcash. The Hashcash CPU cost function computes a token which can be used as a proof of work. Interactive and non-interactive variants of cost function can be constructed, which can be used in situations where the server can issue a challenge, connection-oriented interactive protocol, and where it cannot, where the communication is stored and forward or packet-oriented, respectively. Right? So how it is used with email? Well, Hashcash is a cryptographic hash-based proof-of-work algorithm that requires a selectable amount of work to compute, right? But the proof can be verified efficiently. How? Let's say for email, right? For email use, a textual encoding of a hashcash stamp is added to the header of an email to prove the sender has expended a modest amount of CPU time calculating the stamp prior to sending the email, right? In other words, as the sender has taken a certain amount of time to generate the stamp and send the email, it is unlikely that they are a spammer. The receiver can, at negligible computational cost, verify that the stamp is valid. However, the only known way to find a header with the necessary properties is brute force, trying random values until the answer is found. Though testing an individual string is easy, satisfactory answers are rare enough that it will require a substantial number of tries to find. The hypothesis is that spammers whose business model rely on their ability to send large number of emails with very little cost per message will cease to be profitable if there is even a small cost for each spam they send. Receivers can verify whether a sender can verify whether a sender made such an investment and use the result to help filter email. Alright, so that's how we're using it, the hashcash function for our email. Next come SHA-2 or Secure Hash Algorithm. It is a set of cryptographic hash functions designed by the United States National Security Agency and first published in 2001 at the beginning of the 21st century. They are built using the Merkle-Darmstadt construction from a one-way compression function itself built using the Davis-Mayer structure from a specialized block cipher. SHA-2 includes significant change from its predecessor, SHA-1. The SHA-2 family consists of 6 hash functions with digest or hash values that are 224, 256, 384, or 512 bits. Also known as SHA-224, SHA-256, SHA-384, SHA-512, SHA-512/224, SHA-512/256, SHA, Secure Hash Algorithm. Of course, SHA-256 and SHA-512 are novel hash functions computed with 8 32-bit and 64-bit words, respectively. They use different shifts amounts and additive constants, but their structure are otherwise computed with different initial value. You do have also a whole raft of cryptographic hash functions available, like Blake, that was created in 2008, Blake 2 in 2012, Blake 3 in 2020, right? You have Havel, you have Kangaroo 12, you have MD2, MD4, MD5, all right? You have SHA-0, 1993, SHA-1, 1995, SHA-224 in 2004. You have, of course, SHA-256 in 2002, right? You have SHA-3 in 2008. You have, of course, Tiger in 1995 or Whirlpool in 2004. To finish with cryptographic hash functions, if we compare, let's say, algorithm output size, internal state size, block size, length size, word size, rounds, let's look at Blake 3, which was created in 2020, right, which is kind of the latest cryptographic hash functions or algorithm that was created in 2020 versus SHA-256, which was created at the beginning of this century. So what do we have? SHA-256, as far as the output, the size of the bits, right, it has 256 bits. Block 3, for example, will have an unlimited amount of bits in its output size. SHA-256 will have an internal state size of 256. Block 3 will have an internal state size of 256, but let's be careful as far as Block 3 is concerned, right? Incremental states do include a chaining value stack up to 1728 bytes in size, 1728 bytes in size. However, the compression function itself does not access this stack. A smaller stack can also be used if the maximum input length is restricted by definition. All right, makes sense. If you restrict the input length, then you can access a smaller stack, right? That's what Block 3 is offering. Now, if we look at what Block 3 is offering in terms of block size, right, we're talking like now 512, right? That's the block size. SHA-256 gives you 512 as far as the block size is concerned. That's, of course, 512 bits. Now, if we're looking at the length size of Block 3, then it's 64 bits, right? If we're looking at length size of SHA-256, it is also 64 bits, right? If you look at the word size, it's for SHA-256, it's still 32 bits. For Block 3, it's 32 too, right? 32 bits, sorry. And of course, if we look at the rounds, yeah, if we look at the rounds, what do we have? For Block 3, okay, we would have 7 rounds, okay? Well, for SHA-256, you would have 64 rounds. But that's a very interesting idea, this idea of round, of course. So where does that come from? Well, it comes from the numerical downguard construction, all right? That's the concept in cryptography, all right? The numerical downguard construction, or hash function, is a method of building collision-resistant cryptographic hash function from collision-resistant one-way compression function. This construction was used in the design of many popular hash algorithms, such as SHA-2, which is the class, the range of algorithm to which SHA-256 belongs to. The numerical downguard construction was described in Ralph Merkel's PhD thesis in 1979 at the end of the 20th century. Ralph Merkel and Ivan Damgard independently proved that the structure is sound. That is, if an appropriate padding scheme is used and the compression function is collision resistant, then the hash function will also be collision resistant. So where does that notion of hash comes from then? Sorry, not hash, sorry, of round comes from? In cryptographic function. Well, we had to go to a website called securitystackexchange.com, which is kind of specialized in security and stack overflow for teams. Okay, it's a private knowledge sharing groups for coders and developers. So what do we see there? What do we read? hash function can be either cryptographically secure or not. That's the first one. Non-secure hash functions are useful for tasks like string mapping, error detection in communication protocols, so they still have a place, but they're not useful for cryptographic purposes because they have certain weaknesses. To be secure, a hashing function needs to have these three specific attributes. Number one is cascading changes. A 1-bit change in the message should result in an unpredictable change of approximately 50% of the bits in the digest, i.e. the bits that are being hashed, of course. So number one is cascading changes. Number two is non-reversible. You can't recreate a message given the hash except by brute force attack. Collision resistance. It is infeasible to find two messages with the same hash value. That's extremely interesting if you think about it, right? You cannot find the same message with the same hash value. Right, okay. Now you're gonna have to think about it. Collision resistant hash function would have for a message A and a message B, and knowing that message A is different from the message B, right? A different from B, A differs from B, right? So H of A, right, which is the hash function, the A word, has to be different from H of B, right, which is the hash function of the B word, right? And you can never have HA equal HB as long as A is different from B, right? That's the key element to understand here. So remember, cascading changes, to be secure, a hashing function needs to have very specific attributes. Number one, cascading changes. You change one bit, it changes the whole thing. Non-reversible, you can't recreate a message given the hash except by brute force attack. Collision resistant, it is infeasible to find two messages with the same hash value. Right, so at its heart, the cascade effect, all right, is the most important attribute as it provides the strength behind the two other attributes. All right, each of these attributes protects against a certain type of attack. By executing a round of hashing, the crypt algorithm makes at least a 1-bit change to the message, resulting in a completely new hash. If the hash algorithm didn't have strong collision resistance, then yes, it would be possible to have multiple rounds that don't change the hash much. I repeat again, if the hash algorithm didn't have strong collision resistance, all right, then yes, it would be possible to have multiple rounds that don't change the hash much. So not having collision resistance has been a problem, of course, with non-cryptographic hash routines like CRC32, where if the same message is altered only slightly, it can produce the same digest value. So if a source is pumping out data that varies by only a few bytes, it's possible that some could collide, leaving you in the circle you described. That's why these attributes are so important for security purpose. They need to deliver each and every time a unique address. That's the key concept to remember here. All right? Now, another reason why we would use round, of course, is the security that is increased by incrementing the number of rounds is the assurance that anyone attempting to generate large number of hashes for a brute force attack will require a suitably unlikely amount of computing power and energy and time, right? Because of the rounds, right? So let's say SHA 512 with 10,000 rounds costs 10 times what SHA 512 with 1,000 rounds costs, right? Then enumerating 10,000 round hashes for whatever purpose will take 10 times as long than with a 1K round of hashes or 1,000 round of hashes. So usually in most applications, the happy day scenario involves only one call to the hash function, right? Just one round, okay? You hashing the password supplied by the user, right? You just hashing the password supplied by the user. So there's only one round you can do with that. The user doesn't know any other password than the one he's created, he or she has created. So we can use a high round number and still allow the user to experience a negligible delay. So you can both cause a collision with too long plain text or with too many applications of the same hashing function. That is, of course, if you are comparing calls with the same number of rounds, right? So say that, for example, 10,000 rounds hash of boo or poo, P-O-O, is A, B, C, D, E, F. And 1,000 round hash of boo, right, B-O-O, is A, B, C, D, E, F. So this is a collision of sorts, right? But you won't have it in the same rounds, if you see what I mean, right? So you would have, on one hand, you get the same value once you get to 1,000 rounds. On the other hand, you get to the same value once you get to 10,000 rounds, okay? But when the system is run, all right, it will not use the hash result at every single round, okay? It will wait until it has completed, okay, the 10,000 rounds before returning the hash. So the system will never even know that a collision was generated at round 1,000. All right, so this is a bit complex and it's a bit difficult to understand maybe for some of you, but it's really, really important to understand that, because those are the different security levels that we have with our Bitcoin ecosystem. All right, we have endogenous, if you want, inside protections, of course. That's definitely the one that we can see there. It's an endogenous protection, cybersecurity level, if you want. And then you have exogenous cybersecurity level that we will see at a later stage as well. Right? So endogenous and exogenous, right? Endogenous inside, exogenous outside of the actual system. Okay? So inside, endogenous will be within the computing structure, the computing architecture, the code, the protocol, and you're going to have exogenous, which will take into account outside factors also in order to protect itself. Right? The system is extremely interesting at that level. As far as cyber security is concerned, we can see that there are two different levels, inside and outside, and many layers of cyber security within the Bitcoin ecosystem and system in itself as well. Right? That's why it is extremely right. So an integer, that's mathematics, of course. Let's not forget. Okay, it's a whole valued positive or negative number of 0. Right? The integers are generated from the set of counting numbers 1, 2, and 3, and the operation of subtraction. Right? When a counting number is subtracted from itself, the result is 0. For example, 3 minus 3 equals 0. So an integer is, of course, a all valued positive or negative number, or indeed 0. So minus 2, minus 1, 2, 1, 3, and the number 0. Okay, so that's the idea of the integer there explained. Another notion that was also hinted at by the document, by the white paper, as per the protocol, of course, was that the notion that you would always have for a nonce value, you would have a block hash that would start by an n count of zeros, right? So, so the block header of the blockchain, is calculated as a concatenation of the following values. First, the version. Number 2, you're going to have the hash of the previous block, of course. Then you're going to have the hash of the Merkle roots. Then you're going to have the timestamps. Then you're going to have the bits. And then you're going to have the nonce, which is a 30-bit number, right? That's the idea. So the first kind of 5 parameters are static for each block, right? Version, the hash from the previous block, the hash from the Merkle root, the timestamp, of course, and the bits. All of this is kind of static. And miner only tries to find out nonce values such that the hash of the block header will start with a certain number of zeros. Okay, so that's the idea there. So, again, this is from the same website, Stack Exchange, right? Which is for Stack Overflow teams, right? And what it says is cryptographic hash functions are collision resistant, and the digests produced by SHA-256 are approximately uniformly distributed. It's approximative, uniformly, and distributed, right? The digest produced by SHA-256. This suggests that if the input space to the hash function is magnitudes bigger than the projection space of a hash function, we would expect that every value of the projection space can be hit, right? So the block header is 80 bytes, and the digest space of SHA-256 is, of course, 32 bytes or 256 bits. Okay, 32 bytes or 256 bits. Right, 1 byte equal 8 bits. Out of the 80 bytes of the block header, version is unrestricted on 29 of 32 bits. Okay. The nonce is a 4 bytes arbitrary value. Right. The Merkle root is a 256-bit digest derived from an enormous combination space, and the timestamp is rather flexible. It's limited to a unit timestamp range of roughly 3 hours and 10,800 seconds. Only the previous block hash and difficulty statement are fixed. All right. So before counting the Merkle roots, right, miners could generate up to 74 bits of an entropy in the block header, right? So the Merkle root, of course, is derived from the set of transactions that a miner is choosing to include in their Bitcoin block, right? The Merkle root is derived from the set of transactions that a miner is choosing to include in their Bitcoin block. Not only the miner can arbitrarily pick content and order of the valid transaction, but also each miner is paying themselves in the Coinbase transaction of their block candidates. I repeat again, not only can the miner pick content and order of the valid transaction, but also each miner is paying themselves in the Coinbase transaction of their block candidates. Given that paying to different addresses results in different Coinbase transactions, every miner is working on a unique transaction set whose Merkle roots making any overlap between block candidates of different miner astronomically unlikely. Right? So I repeat again, given that paying to different addresses, okay, results in different Coinbase transactions, every miner is working on a unique transaction set whose Merkle roots making any overlap between block candidates of different minor astronomically unlikely. Further, part of the Coinbase transaction inputs can be picked arbitrarily, right? The extra nouns, the famous extra nouns, right? Giving miner a way to easily add further entropy to the set of block candidates they are evaluating. Additionally, miners update their block candidate transaction composition whenever more new transactions paying higher fee rates arrive. Even if there were no transaction to add in the block, miners could just generate a different address to pay themselves for using the Coinbase after exhausting the nouns and extra nouns space. Given the power set of all possible transaction order, the address space of Bitcoin and the 100 bytes input script in sum by far exceeds 32-byte digest size of SHA-256, right? So some would argue that the Merkle roots provide a full 32 bytes of entropy. So I know what's intriguing you now. It's of course this notion of the Merkle tree. So let's have a look at what a Merkle tree is. In cryptography and computer science, of course, a hash tree or a Merkle tree is a tree in which every leaf kind of node is labeled with the cryptographic hash of a data block, and every non-leaf node is labeled with the cryptographic hash of the labels of its child nodes. Hash trees allow efficient and secure verification of the contents of large data structure. Hash trees are a generalization of hash lists and hash chains. So if you want to demonstrate that a leaf node is part of a given binary hash tree, requires computing of a number of hashes proportional to the logarithm of the number of leaf nodes of the tree. This contrasts, of course, with hash lists, where the number is proportional to the number of leaf node itself. The concept of hash tree was, of course, named after Ralph Merkle, who patented the idea in 1979 at the end of the 20th century. So how does it look like? So let's say you have a top hash, right? And at the top of your hash, you have a hash, let's say 0, and you have your hash 1, all right? They're all together as a top hash, all right? Now you have a tree, okay? Which means you split that, that idea of the square, right? With the top hash, you have now 2 different branches, okay? You have one branch that goes towards hash 0 and the other branch that goes towards hash 1, all right? So top hash, which has hash 0 plus hash 1, all right, split into now 2 branches, which has one has hash 0 and the other one has hash 1. Within hash 0 now, you could have multiple combinations. You could have hash 00 and hash 01, obviously. Now, within hash 1, you could have multiple combinations too. You could have hash 10 or hash 11. Makes sense? Okay? And then, within hash 0, once you split hash 0 in now 2 branches again, you have hash 00, which will become hash, let's say, T1. And then you're gonna have hash 01, which we're gonna call it hash T2. Okay, that's one part of the tree. And then on the other side of the tree, you still have your hash 1, right? Which is now split between hash 10, which we're gonna call hash T3, and then of course the hash we mentioned a few seconds earlier, which is hash 11, right? Which we're gonna call hash T4. Okay, and then underneath it, that's how we're going to build now your data block. Okay, and that's basically an example of a binary hash tree. Okay, where hashes 00 and hash 01 are the hash values of data block T1 and T2 respectively. And of course, hash 0 at the top is the hash of the concatenation of hashes 00 and hashes 01. Same on the other side of the tree, right? The other branch, you're going to have hash 1, which is the hash of the concatenation of hash 10 and hash 11. Okay, that's for the Merkle tree. All of this will help you really understand the core innovation and the roots of the Bitcoin system as far as, of course, cyber security is concerned, and what we would call the indigenous protection and cybersecurity system within the network. So you get it, right? So the Merkle tree is used for verification of transactions, right? So that's really its main function. All right. So another thing we can look at is also the Coinbase transaction, right? This is an article. This is a French article actually. Yeah, that's cryptoast.fr, cryptoast.fr. Right. I do just dabble into the French, of course, and so I'm not going to read in French. I'm going to read in English, but I'm going to translate live if you want. So within the blockchain, a Coinbase transaction is actually the first transaction of a block. This one is absolutely unique and can only be created by the miner of the said block. The role of this transaction is very important, right? It is the transaction which rewards the miner for its work. That's very important for the security level. That's another security level, of course, because if people within the network have an incentive to look after the network, that provides you also with the first line of defense against any would-be attacker, and also any problem that might arise with the network as far as the maintenance of the network, because a lot of people have interest and a stake in the network functioning at its best, because they are being rewarded for having a good network and for doing the good work, which is to mine transactions. Okay. So, in the case of the Bitcoin blockchain, right, it is via the Coinbase transaction that the 6.25 Bitcoin are attributed to the miner. All right. Each transaction fee received by the miner, all right, are being paid during this transaction. Okay. Well, else you would say that most of the usual Bitcoin transactions are made of several inputs because of the multiple output that you could have. A Coinbase transaction doesn't have any parents, okay, and creates new Bitcoin from nothing, literally. All right, that's the idea, okay. And of course, the number of Bitcoin and BTC being part of a Coinbase transaction evolved with time via an event called the halving. Okay, it is via this mechanism that every 210,000 blocks, or roughly every 4 years, all right, the reward paid to the miners is divided by 2, hence the name halving, right? Every 4 years, you will have a halving happening, all right? Meaning the miners will gain less and less Bitcoin. Might not be less and less money into the physical world, because as we know, the Bitcoin price points has been going up and up in 2021, despite a few dips here and there. As I say, buy the dip. This is not financial advice, of course, but it's just a personal opinion. Also, you have something to realize about this 6.25 Bitcoin received by the miners right now. You cannot spend it before having received at least 100 confirmation after that particular transaction. So roughly a miner has to wait 16 to 17 hours before being able to access its Bitcoin. 16 to 17 hours. Okay, so you have to be patient if you're a miner, because you won't have your money as soon as you mine the actual coin. All right, and if you try to spend, of course, the coin generated before that given time, then it will be rejected. Okay, so it's called Coinbase maturity. All right, that's the idea of the Coinbase. A Coinbase transaction can contain any kind of data that you want to add. Okay, as far as the miner is concerned, right? And usually miners will add their pseudo, the name, the avatars, or the pool from where they are mining from. Okay? And of course, the most famous transaction and the most famous message was recorded by Satoshi Nakamoto himself in the Genesis block of the Bitcoin. And it says, of course, the time 03 January 2009, Chancellor on break of second bailout for banks. All right, that was after the famous 2008-2009 Great Recession in the UK, or also known as credit crunch, as far as the British press is concerned. Okay, I do hope you appreciate our little effort here. We're really looking at the cybersecurity aspect of the networking. We need to go down a little bit down the rabbit hole in order to really assess what makes this network really collision resistance, of course, but also resistance to in terms of resistant and resilient as far as cyber security is concerned, of course. Now we're looking at something else. Still in the same kind of realm. We're looking at the full list of Bitcoin addresses prefix. All right. So public key hash will start with 1, right? That's usually what you will have for your public key. All right. It will start with number 1. The script hash, or the SegWit to witness public key hash, right? Or should we say wallet, will start with number 3. All right. And then you have different leading symbols like BC1, TB1 for the SegWit testnet. SegWit being segregated witness. We'll start looking at it. Don't worry about it. We will definitely go into it. We'll go into it slowly. I will ease you into that process. Okay. So follow me. It's going to be easy. Okay? As long as you follow me. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Right. And you have a full list of Bitcoin addresses prefix that you can check on allprivatekeys.com. allprivatekeys.com. All right. Another place where you can go is, of course, on BlockChair, where you can literally have the detailed data of each and every block, right? And you can see the difficulty, you can see the size of the block, you can see the weight, you can see the stripes, you can see the version, the different version, the medium time, the Merkle roots, of course. All of this block it can be, if you want, unpacked or detailed, all right, from that website, which gives you really a total vision of the hash and everything. You can really see the time it was mined, who was the miner behind the block, of course, and look at the fee, the transaction count, and all the data, all the notions that we've been talking about within this podcast will actually appear on BlockChair, which is blockchair.com. blockchain.com. Block like a block and chair like a chair.com. So please have a look at those websites, of course, or at least I would ask you to bookmark them and to, by this action if you want, it will enable you to so to speak, to keep your eye on the streets, right? On the crypto streets. Keep your eye on what's going on, and it will help you keep a permanent watch. You have to keep a permanent watch on what's going on in the crypto streets. You have to keep educating yourself also. It's an ongoing educational process which doesn't stop, right? So it's a new technology. It's constantly evolving. You have some of the smartest people, smartest computer scientists of their generation working on that protocol. So of course it's going to be evolving, it's going to change, it's going to mutate, it's going to be different over the time. So hence the necessity to keep a permanent watch. So that's why I'm asking you to bookmark all those websites, of course, and to also keep yourself ready to learn and to expand your bandwidth, especially when it comes to those cybersecurity issues, whether they are endogenous to Bitcoin network, right? You're going to have endogenous cybersecurity features within the network, and then you're going to have exogenous cybersecurity features, which are outside the network or resulting from interaction with the public. So it's just like those Bitcoin invoice addresses, which have an identifier of 26 to 35 alphanumeric characters beginning with the number 1, 3, or BC1, right? It represents a possible destination for Bitcoin payments, okay? Invoices can be generated at no cost by any user of Bitcoin. It is also possible to get a Bitcoin invoice address using an account at an exchange or online wallet service, right? So what are the type of address format you're going to have? Well, we kind of hinted about that on the Bitcoin mainnet, all right, which is the main chain, okay, the main information feed, right? You're going to have P2P KH, which is P2P public key hash, right, which begin with the number 1, okay? Pay to public key hash, all right? So, and then you're going to have P2SH, which is pay to script hash, okay, type, which starts with the number 3, okay, pay to, right? Pay to somebody, all right? And then you're also going to have PECH32 type starting with BC1. All right, so this is the end. Yes, it is, right? I think we're gonna shut shop for today. Shutting down shop, RIPDMX. Right, so that is enough knowledge for you. Knowing that you will have to listen to this podcast at least 3 times in order to get the gist of what we were trying to explain today. My name is Hermann Djoumessi, as you know, social media analyst, blockchain specialist, Google Analytics certified. You can find us ADMP, Virtual Incubator, hashtag ADMP on all the good platform and wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, so we're gonna give you a few places where you can still carry on finding us. Of course, we are on the good Substack, all right, admpincubator.substack.com. Of course, the last article is about the Satoshi'S Corner, Season 1, Episode 8, but also it's a time for the crypto social metaverse, of course, and we are going to be involved in a conference in Tunisia at the Manuba Technopark in Tunisia on the 4th of June 2021. So yes, we talk about metaverse, we talk about Fortnite, of course, Deadmau5, T-Aoki, Dylan Francis, and of course the multiple metaverse that as a startup you can now use in order to start dominating your social media game, and also the necessity for startups, new business to create social media room where they will, if you want, gather and aggregate all the news feeds from the different metaverse into one room so that the social media team can actually work at its best. All right, so I do invite you to have a look at our blog, of course. You can also find us on Twitter at Team ADMP, of course, or simply hashtag ADMP, of course. You can find us on Facebook, do a simple research, hashtag ADMP, you're looking for groups, and you will find us. We have amazing amount of community. We have more than 14,000 people online listening to us or reading our article or simply aggregating together in order to create new projects. We are a virtual incubator, of course, a virtual crypto incubator. So that is what we do. So you can also find us, so I said Substack, of course, at Team ADMP on Twitter. And we also have a Discord, which is Metabarons, METABARONS. Right, so that's for some of you who wants to go deeper into the crypto knowledge and do maybe dabble into a little bit of trading and things of that nature. I'm always against people who trade blindly, meaning you trade without having the knowledge. So first you have to have the market information, but you also have the technology information. I supply the technology information, somebody else has supplied market information, and that's supplied by the entire community on Discord. So it will help you save probably a few bucks and a few sats, a few Satoshis. Right, so big up to the entire ADMP team, of course, who's doing this amazing work of collecting all that information together, putting all of this together, and actually sending it to me so that I can actually now read to you. So we're doing an amazing work as far as archiving is concerned, as far as research is concerned, as far as data mining is concerned. So we do a lot of work in the background, in the back office. So please, be nice and be kind in your comments whenever you talk about us. Feel free to comment. I'm going to ask you to share this content. It's extremely important that we do what we do so that people actually now get to know what is behind that technology. This is extremely important what we're doing right now. There is a lot of there is a lot of bad words being said about the crypto community or the crypto industry or the crypto technology. But very few people have actually read this white paper, and very few people have actually done what we're doing right now. So we're doing an amazing job, and you are also doing an amazing job listening to it, but you will be doing a fantastic job on top of your amazing job if you were actually sharing this content so that we can grow our community, we can grow our efforts, and we can be a bigger voice and better educated voice as well. And also we're going to have to educate the people around us about what that technology entails, really. Okay? So thank you again for listening to this podcast. It was a bit long. I know it went into a bit of details, but it was necessary in order to understand the endogenous and exogenous security factors within the Bitcoin global network. All right. So my name was Hermann Djoumessi. I'm dropping the mic. I'm out. Stay strong. Stay resilient. Have a nice day. Have a nice week. Have a nice month. Have a nice year. Bye-bye.
My name is Hermann Djoumessi, social media, blockchain, and big data consultant. This podcast is a bite-sized summary of a potential conversation with Satoshi Nakamoto's seminal white paper, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The goal of this podcast is to establish the many sources and resources necessary to create, deploy, and optimize blockchain technology ecosystem in order to establish a Bitcoin or blockchain standard for businesses and organizations in the 21st century.
Proof of work.